It's July 13th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the Yoon Kishida sit-downs in Vilnius. President Yoon has requested Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida to get Korean experts involved in monitoring the Fukushima wastewater release. Kishida says he'll make sure the discharge does no harm to the health of the South Korean public. North Korea confirms that it test fired a Hwasong-18 solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile on Wednesday. The regime's leader Kim Jong-un warns of more military actions until the U.S. drops its aggressive policies against the North. And over in the U.S., inflation once again cooled in June, with prices up 3% from a year ago, the smallest rise since March 2021. President Yoon begins his first-day visit to Europe in Warsaw, looking to broaden Seoul's engagement with the continent. Yoon on Wednesday met with South Korean expats in the Polish capital and emphasized the two countries' strategic partnership based on their growing economic relations. Now traveling with a delegation of 89 corporate leaders, the South Korean leaders' visit is expected to focus on expanding economic cooperation in high-tech technologies, as well as in the construction sector as a part of efforts to rebuild Ukraine. Yoon on Thursday will meet with the Polish President Andrzej Duda for a bilateral summit, followed by separate talks with the Prime Minister and both parliamentary speakers. And before heading to Poland, President Yoon held talks with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on various topics of mutual interest, including concerns over the Fukushima wastewater release plan. Our Kim Do-yeon has the details.
Sitting down with his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida on the sidelines of the NATO summit on Wednesday, President Yoon made three requests to further ensure the safety of South Koreans ahead of the planned release of Fukushima nuclear power plant wastewater. The first, that Japan share the release's monitoring results in real time with South Korea. The second, the South Korean experts be part of the monitoring team. And finally, that Japan halts the release process if the concentration of radioactive materials surpasses standards. Yoon also said he respects the IAEA's recent report that the release plan meets international standards, but re-emphasized that the health and safety of South Koreans are the utmost priority. According to the top office, Kishida said there won't be any release that threatens the health of people in South Korea or Japan and promised transparency and real-time communications. However, the Japanese government didn't make a clear announcement on whether South Korea's request to be part of the monitoring team will be accepted. Despite the sensitive issue, the two leaders embraced their newly improved relationship. The two last met just a month and a half ago, and both said the resumption of more direct diplomacy is bearing fruit.
함께 노력한 결과 한일 양국 관계는 개선과 발전의 방향으로 지금 움직이고 있습니다. 저는 한일 양국이 협력하여 영내 평화와 번영, 글로벌 현안 해결에 크게 기여할 수 있다고 믿습니다.
As President Yoon and I have opened a new era for the two countries, there has been progress in various different types of cooperation in both government and private sectors.
According to the top office, the leaders also spoke about economic exchanges, which have resumed since the normalization of the relationship, with Japan relisting South Korea on its white list for trade. The two promised more official channels to further foster bilateral trade. In the meantime, they also used the opportunity to condemn North Korea's missile provocation from earlier in the day and promised to cooperate further on that issue. They also mentioned the three-way cooperation with the U.S. and pledged to continue working closely for security in the region. In fact, such a meeting is in the pipeline in the next month or two, with a Seoul, Washington, Tokyo trilateral summit already agreed. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, let's take a closer look at President Yoon Suk-yeol's request to Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida over the Fukushima wastewater release with Professor Kim Mi-kyung this morning. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Professor Kim, President Yoon asked Kishida to include South Korean experts in monitoring the planned release of the wastewater. Now, the question is, how will the inclusion of South Korean experts be so helpful?
I don't think that is going to happen. Let me tell you why. One noteworthy interaction between the two leaders is that Japanese Prime Minister Kishida evaded to respond to President Yoon's proposal to include Korean experts in the monitoring team during the bilateral summit meeting. We can guess the Seoul government will exercise its share of influence in picking and choosing who will be included in the expert team. As you know, the Yuna administration has been supportive of Japan's plan to release the treated contaminated water. Yet, Kishida's evasive reaction seems to reflect Japan's concern that the matter of affairs can change once Yoon is out of power. Therefore, from Japan's point of view, it is better not to let any Korean experts in the group, given the possibility of regime change in Seoul. Japan would not want to play a different ballgame with a different partner. Yoon's reign will be over in 4 years, but the contaminated water release will take place over 3 decades.
Mm-hmm. Then, in the meantime, Kishida replied that he'll do everything possible to secure the safety of the release and not discharge any water that could harm the health or the safety of the South Korean people, and including those people in Japan as well. But what's your take on this?
What else can he say other than that? What he has said is about principles and normative workings that Japanese government has to engage in when it comes down to the release of contaminated waters. The decision has been made with the strong support of IAEA, but there are dissenting voices coming from various groups in both countries. People are feeling wary. In order to calm them down, the Japanese government has to send out those assuring and reassuring messages. That's what's happening. If anything goes wrong, Tokyo will have an excuse saying that they did not know at that time. Let us keep our fingers crossed that nothing disastrous is going to happen.
Sure. Securing health and safety of Korean people and Japanese people is the principle, like you said, and has to be the core of the release if it actually happens. Now, that plan appears to be very imminent, right, as early as next month. What do you think needs to be prepared, secured, or even ensured in the next few weeks or for the coming years?
Transparency. Transparency. I cannot emphasize it more. Real-time and open release of relevant information. Japan has a tendency of keeping controversial information just to themselves, and some people justify it as a manifestation of shame culture. But when it comes down to safety and health hazard, forget about those abstract concepts. What matters is people's livelihood. Transparency will allow the positive workings of collective wisdom.
Sure, keeping transparency in the entire process that will take 3 decades. Now, the two sides, Yoon and Kishida, also agreed to further tighten their cooperation against North Korea's nuclear and missile programs and provocations. Can we now say more direct diplomacy between the two leaders is fully back on track? I mean, how do you think Seoul-Tokyo ties will look from now on?
It does seem like the shuttle diplomacy is back on track. How lucky Mr. Kishida is to have Mr. Yoon as his staunch ally in Seoul. The two countries will remain, I think, cordial for a few coming years. The two leaders do seem to get along very well, and they do seem to have mutual understanding of the important and pressing issues in the region.
Sure, things between the two countries have been smoother if we have to compare with what we've gone through for the past years of, historical disputes and diplomatic struggles and conflicts. So it is better now, right?
It does seem like that. And, and what's going to unfold in the future? Let's keep our eyes peeled.
Sure.
and see how the two countries get along with each other.
Indeed. Professor Kim Mi-kyung, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Busan this morning.
Thank you.
And President Yoon Suk-yeol continued to live up to his moniker of #1 salesman as they work to strengthen supply chains of advanced tech industries and expand into new markets during the NATO summit. Lee Soo-jin reports.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol continues to pursue sales diplomacy. He attended 13 bilateral meetings during the NATO summit in Lithuania in an effort to strengthen the supply chain for key high-tech industries such as semiconductors and to expand into new markets.
This NATO summit had the largest number of bilateral talks with 13. Notably, 8 of them were the first bilateral meeting since the inauguration of President Yoon, and it is expected to be a starting point for creating new achievements in the future.
Yoon's meeting with Lithuania's President Nausėda on Wednesday was significant in terms of securing supply chains in the advanced tech industry, especially as the nation is a global leader in laser tech that's essential for ultra-precision and ultra-micro processing of semiconductors. During the summit, both Yoon and Nausėda said they hope to expand cooperation between companies of both respective countries in the advanced tech sector. The Lithuanian president also expressed interest in South Korea's advanced weapon systems such as self-propelled artillery. President Yoon also met with the Prime Minister of the Netherlands on Tuesday to strongly encourage Dutch semiconductor equipment company ASML to invest in Korea. ASML is the maker of the world's top DUV lithography systems and is known to be currently considering building a DUV manufacturing plant in Asia. Yoon promised incentives such as financial support and tax deductions. As for expanding into new markets, South Korea is mainly trying to boost exports of nuclear power plants, arms, and infrastructure.
President Yoon explained the advantages of Korean-made nuclear power plants to the heads of the Netherlands, Hungary, Romania, and Sweden, all nations that have plans to build new nuclear power plants, and also offered cooperation on the nuclear front.
The top office also said that it would put in its best efforts to work with relevant ministries and companies to systematically follow up with the agenda items discussed during the summit to produce meaningful results. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
And the South Korean leader also prioritized North Korea issues at NATO, vowing to secure a tighter collective security against the regime's provocations. Our top office correspondent Oh Soo-young has more from Vilnius.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has called for stronger condemnation and response to North Korea's nuclear and missile provocations as he addressed world leaders at a meeting of NATO countries in Lithuania extended to invited nations. Noting that North Korea's missiles reach could extend beyond its neighboring countries to cities like London, Paris and Berlin, Yoon on Wednesday warned that Pyongyang's actions threaten global peace and security. On that note, the South Korean leader expressed appreciation for NATO's condemnation of Pyongyang's nuclear weapons program in a joint communiqué released the previous day, which also calls for North Korea's complete, verifiable and irreversible denuclearization. NATO's statement in 2022 did not include North Korea, and the alliance has not issued a joint condemnation of the regime's nuclear and missile program since 2018. During his speech, Yoon also renewed Seoul's support for Ukraine, currently provided in the form of humanitarian aid and non-lethal weapons. The president emphatically promised that he and South Koreans will stand with Ukrainians until the day when their freedom is fully restored, and pledged to contribute to the NATO-Ukraine Trust Funds towards building Kyiv's resilience. Furthermore, reflecting on Seoul's new bilateral partnership program with NATO adopted Tuesday, covering 11 areas of cooperation, Yoon highlighted cyber cooperation and expanding military intel sharing as vital areas going forward, was South Korea to establish an international cyber training center. A senior presidential official told reporters Seoul is also expected to work closely with NATO on the organization's system that collects and utilizes military intelligence among member countries. Increasing its participation in information exchanges could provide insights for Seoul on sharing nuclear-related intelligence with the United States, as the two allies create and operate a nuclear consultation group to counter North Korea's growing belligerence. On that note, President Yoon stressed that the growing use of digital media and cyberspace are being leveraged by authoritarian forces, whose unhesitant use of war violence and manipulation of public opinion challenge international norms. He called for nations with common universal values to cooperate more firmly in solidarity, saying Indo-Pacific and Atlantic security issues cannot be separated. On that note, Yoon on Wednesday moderated the second meeting of NATO's 4 Asia-Pacific partners, Japan, Australia and New Zealand. Yoon's office says the AP4 leaders agreed to work more closely with NATO and Pacific Island countries, as well as bolster cooperation on supply chain diversity and resilience and cybersecurity. 오수영, Arirang News, Vilnius.
And just hours ago, North Korea confirmed that it test fired its Hwasong-18 solid-fuel ICBM on Wednesday, with the operation being guided by leader Kim Jong-un. According to North Korean media, the missile flew 1,001 kilometers for 4,491 seconds at an altitude of 6,648 kilometers before splashing into the East Sea. The report says the regime conducted the missile test to confirm the capability and reliability of a new strategic weapon system. It added that Kim vowed to take military offensive action until the U.S. abandons its hostile policy against the regime. U.S. Consumer Price Index slowed faster than expected in the month of June. Now, expectations are high that the Federal Reserve may make its final rate hike in July. Our Lee Seung-ja has more.
As the U.S. Consumer Price Index slowed faster than expected in June, expectations are growing that the end is near for U.S. Federal Reserve interest rate hikes. According to U.S. Department of Labor on Wednesday, June CPI rose 3.0% from the same month last year, slightly below the market forecast of 3.1%. The latest figures show that the country's inflation had shrank by a third since the June 2022 CPI showed a 9.1% rise compared to the same month the previous year. The June core CPI, which excludes volatile food and energy prices, rose 4.8% from a year ago, but was again below the market consensus of 5%. While some believe that the faster-than-expected slowdown in the country's inflation means that the U.S. Central Bank will impose a final hike in July instead of the 2 more rate hikes this year that policymakers had previously hinted, others are more cautious. They say that because core CPI is still in the 4% range, which is twice the U.S. Fed's target of 2%, the central bank could go ahead with 2 more rate hikes this year. Still, investors seem to be optimistic over the latest CPI figures as U.S. stocks and treasuries rallied while the U.S. dollar tumbled. Wall Street's benchmark S&P 500 stock index on Wednesday closed 0.7% higher, marking its highest level since April 2022, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq rose 1.2% on the day. Traders expect the U.S. Fed to pause its rate hike after a 25 basis point rate hike in July, putting the country's key interest rate in the 5.25 to 5.5% range. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in Italy, where at least 1 person has died amid soaring temperatures. The rising mercury is part of a heat wave named Cerberus after the mythological 3-headed dog. High temperatures are expected to continue for 2 weeks, and a new heat wave called Charon is set to replace Cerberus on Friday. The heat waves are threatening to top Italy's previous high of 48.8 degrees Celsius, set in August 2021 in Sicily. Other countries, including Spain, France and Greece, could see temperatures surpass 40 degrees. Several tourists in Italy have collapsed from the heat, and people are being urged to stay hydrated and to avoid drinking caffeine or alcohol. Now, the European Union has passed a law aimed at restoring damaged ecosystems. The nature restoration law was passed in the EU Parliament in Brussels on Wednesday, with 336 votes in favour and 300 against. It means that countries in the bloc will need to restore 20% of the EU's natural land and sea ecosystems by 2030. It comes as Europe has seen a decline in its natural habitats, 81% of which have been determined to be in poor condition. The law was fiercely opposed by right-wing parties who say that it would harm farmers and risk food security. The bill's text will now be negotiated before a final agreement is reached. Now, in more good news for nature, Colombia says that deforestation across the country fell 29% in 2022 compared to the previous year, while deforestation of its part of the Amazon rainforest dropped by 26%. Announced by the Colombian government on Wednesday, it's the lowest level of deforestation since 2013. Just over 1,200 square kilometers of forest was cut down, roughly 220,000 football fields. It's down from the 2021 total deforestation figure of 1,700 square kilometers. The drop was credited to paying local communities to protect forests and to criminal investigations launched against anyone suspected of financing deforestation. And finally, the 75th Primetime Emmy Awards announced its list of nominations on Wednesday. The drama Succession led the pack with 27 nominations, including those for Best Drama, Lead Actress, and even 3 of its cast tipped for Lead Actor. Not far behind was the video game adaptation Last of Us at 24 nominations. It was followed by Season 2 of White Lotus with 23 nominations. The awards show is considered the TV equivalent to the Oscars and honors the best in American primetime television over the past year. The winners will be announced on September 19th.
Good morning. We need to brace for massive monsoon rainfall. Starting this afternoon, central regions will receive 30 to 80 millimeters an hour of very heavy rain. Then the south will get heavy showers tomorrow. Right now, rain is pounding down in Chungcheongdo and Jeollado provinces. So rain advisory has been issued in parts of those provinces, but the advisory could be expanded to the whole country with preliminary rain advisory issued except on Jeju, where heat warnings are in being placed. The capital area could see up to 250 millimeters of showers into tomorrow. The rest of the country could see more than 200 millimeters. For now, we are looking at downpours in the capital around mid-afternoon and after midnight. Temperatures will not rise that much today, with most parts seeing figures in the mid to upper 20s this afternoon. And please stay safe today. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. Stay safe wherever you are.